Hi, and welcome to the Agile in Action podcast. I am your host, Bill Raymond, and today I'm joined by David Pereira. Hi, David. How are you today?
Doing great.
Wonderful. David, you are the CEO of Amoco GmbH, which offers native cloud solutions for cargo terminals. You're a keynote speaker, and you are the author of a new book you just released titled Untrapping Product Teams. David, is there anything else you'd like to share about yourself with our audience today?
Sure. Thanks for the introduction.
Mm,
And one thing that I love doing is blogging. So I'm also the author of the Untrapping Product Teams newsletter, which people can benefit for free and consume some insights weekly.
that's a great newsletter, by the way. I do follow all of your writing, and you're an excellent writer. You've always had some great ideas to share with people, and I really appreciate your supporting the community. Today, we're going to be talking about avoiding the traps down the value trail, and we'll get into what that means in just a minute. But one of the things that we will be talking about is this role called a product manager. And many of our listeners have been asking what exactly that role is and how it relates to value. So, could you share your definition of the product manager for everyone?
Sure. I will give my version. So what I perceive a product manager is the one who uncover what drives value and lead teams to enable that to happen. So that entails experimentation, trial and error, and ditching solutions that don't work and stick with the ones that work. It's a lot of work to do it. It goes from strategy to delivery.
You just released a book titled Untrapping Product Teams. Before we get into untrapping, let's talk about what you mean by a trap in this context.
Trap is something that blocks you or slows you down from doing what you should be doing. Something that distracts you from creating value and may even hurt you from doing that. The problem is that sometimes we don't even know we are trapped. And that's what happens. Some traps are very clear. Sometimes we want to achieve something and we cannot get there. And then we realize that there is something on the way. For example, you cannot talk to the customer because someone is blocking you to talk to the customer. That's a clear trap you can see. But then I say about another, you have a huge backlog. At first glance, you may say, that's good. Everything is clear. We know what to do. But actually, that's a trap. Because when you have a bloated backlog, you get so focused on the past instead of looking into the future and adapting according to your learning. So, trap is a distraction. It's something that you don't want to have when you are creating value.
We're going to talk about how we define value in a minute, but I'd like to drill down a little bit more into this because we all do this, right? We work day to day, we have our backlog of things that we're doing, we're getting the work done, and we feel like we're moving forward. I understand what you're saying about value, but I guess there might be some inflection point where we should just recognize that we are in these traps. What are some signs that we might see to recognize when we're falling into these traps?
It can happen without knowing. I believe that no company will be perfect. They will have different things that distract teams. For now, I have worked for more than 10 companies and I have seen different traps on the way. But one thing, the beginning of my career, I got promoted because I helped the team increase velocity. And we keep delivering more and more sprint after sprint. We got it right how to make delivery accelerate. And that was nice to me. I was excited. It was nice to see the graph just pumping, and so on. Until I realized actually the delivering more feature didn't mean create more value. I got excited with the wrong thing. Problem was stakeholders also got excited about it because
Mm.
they liked seeing the team delivering more. I got promoted by that. But once I realized that we couldn't increase the value for customers, on the contrary, some customers even told me, I used to like the product, but now it's so bloated with features, I don't even find what I liked anymore. I got distracted.
That's a great story, and I appreciate your sharing that. Especially when you get started, you're always thinking, well, you're building this product to help your customer, just for the customer to turn around and say, I'm not getting value out of it now. So, with this experience that you've built over the years, how do you define value?
Value for me, it's two-sided. It will be a transaction. So customers collect value when we do one of the three things. We solve a pain they have, we deliver on the need they want to cover, or we deliver on a wish. Let me elaborate a little bit on this. with some aspects here. For example, I live in Germany. When I moved to Germany, there was something quite painful for me, which means tax declaration. I had to do that not knowing the language, and it was very complicated. But then I found a system that I could just take a picture of my paper there, and then boom, it would do everything for me. It removed the pain I had. And what did I do for that? I paid a subscription in exchange. So it means that the company received monetary value. That is a pain that it solved. But I had a need at some point in time. I didn't want to be outdated in my field. So I had to level up my knowledge. There are different ways of doing that. One of the ways for me was learning from practitioners. So someone who is doing something. And I found Udemy. Many people were sharing their experience and homemade courses. And I like that because it was honest, it was authentic. What was value for that? I had a need of developing my skills. And Udemy helped me connect with someone who had done what I wanted to do, and this person was sharing. I collect knowledge as a value. The instructor collect revenue share as a value for the instructor. And Udemy collected a revenue share for them as a business. So that is related to the need. And then we have the wish. And some people say, wish? What is that? Sometimes we pay for something just because we want to have. We don't really need that. When I got married, I love eating, but I realized that neither my wife nor I were good at cooking. We could survive. We wouldn't starve. We could do some things, but we wanted to level up. But then we said, how do we do that? We had a wish of becoming better at cooking. Then we heard about HelloFresh. And what HelloFresh did for us was simplifying the game. So they would send us 3 dishes a week with all the ingredients and the recipe. And then we would cook. We covered our wish. We level up our cooking skill, had tasty homemade meal, and HelloFresh got a monthly subscription from me. So value is about the transaction, but it doesn't need to be monetary all the time. For example, when you use a social media, you may not pay anything for that. You think at the first glance. What is value for the social media in this case? It's your time, your attention, because they can use your attention as a value exchange for advertisers. So they say, we have this amount of active customers per hour, and you can advertise for them. So that's how it collects. And once we understand this equation, what value means for our customers, each product has a different definition for that or a different way of delivering value, then we can figure out what we need to do to deliver on that.
We talked about wishes and adding customer value, and there's this kind of balance that we have where we know what the product is supposed to do, and we know that we need to continue adding value. But there are times when we kind of need to look ahead, and we're not quite sure what that look ahead will look like. For example, you and I are writers, so we have writing tools at our disposal that allow us to write better content. So I have some great AI that helps me make sure that my commas are in the right place, make sure that my grammar is proper. But then it started adding AI features on top that were not adding value. What it was doing is literally rewriting paragraphs for me on my behalf without me really getting a chance to understand what it was doing. That to me is not adding value. It's something that takes away from it. But everyone knows that if you don't put AI into your product, then you're not going to get the right valuation and things like that. So how do you balance this concept of adding value to your product, knowing that there is some sort of a future thing that needs to be done in the product, and you're not quite sure what it's going to look like yet? And maybe the customer doesn't even know what it is that they're expecting.
It is about understanding the customer. So today it's very easy to jump into the solution space. With AI is even easier. There are many tools out there. You can just prompt and say, create a design of an app that will do A, B, and C. I'm pretty sure you get that done in 30 seconds and you have a sequence of wireframes. It doesn't mean you understood the problem customer having. So great products, they come from great problem understanding. And then what am I saying here? Do you understand the jobs to be done the customers are trying to do? If we look at the product that became global and it's almost a verb, Uber, for example, what is the job? a person wants to move from A to B. And hiring a taxi to do that is not always easy. It's not always fun. There's some pain. And then you can ask the question, how many customers have this kind of pain? How much do they care about this? And what is our ability to provide a solution that is better than that? And if you can provide a solution that is not just incrementally better, but 10 times better, then customers will change how they get the job done. So today, what I see is instead of talking about which job are we making better, we start saying like how we are making the solution better. And that's not something I like. Going back to your example of tools for writing and so on, I have been using a few tools. I like Grammarly, for example. And I used to say that Grammarly was good for me, not because it corrected my typos, because it made me a better writer when it helped me see what I was not seeing. But when Grammarly starts saying, I'm going to adapt with this AI, I actually just turned off that because that was distracting me. I don't want Grammarly to do that. I want Grammarly to make me a better writer. So great products help you do a job and make you better at that. But to enable someone to do that, it means you need to have a deep understanding of the problem space instead of moving straight ahead to the solution space.
These are super exciting times, especially for software developers. Hardware is getting better, software is getting better, AI, the cloud, all these different capabilities just kind of keep coming at us. And it gives us an opportunity to say, we've been building this app, this product, this website, whatever it is, for a long time. Now we might be able to reshape an entire industry. So we create something new. And now the industry is looking at us as a leader in that space. So we're really excited. We want to remain a leader. So we start adding all this extra customer feedback. And when we start doing that, we can just fall right back into that same trap again, can't we?
Yes, very easily. And that is a misunderstanding because there are many people that think that a great product is the one you have nothing to add. So it has all the features that are necessary. And I say it's different. A great product is the one you have nothing to remove because it does a job done super well that the customers know exactly what to do. You go back to Uber. It's very simple. You just go there, you put the address where you want to go, and it shows what is available. But to get to this level of simplicity, it means loads of optimization. So the initial excitement, you put an app live, and that's actually the moment the real job begins because you need to see how people understand that. How do you help them get the job done? And once you start tweaking here and so on, you are making the real change. But it's very easy for us to say, hey, let's implement voice recognition instead of just typing the address. Let's use some AI here. Let's start doing this and that and that. But that is the point I would say. Are you developing something that is rational for the user or natural? Because if it's rational, then you are relying on luck. The person needs to understand, rationalize, and use it. But if it's natural, they just go and use it. That's the reason that some apps became so popular. For example, Tinder, swipe right or left, and then you may have a match or not. And it's a very simple app, but it became popular because it became natural the way it is. So the core is let's not start bloating our product. Let's focus on a problem worth solving and solve it in a good way. But not everyone is so excited about this stage of growing the problem, understanding and solving it better, making it more natural instead of rational.
Now would probably be a good time to just remind everyone that's listening. We've talked a lot about the product manager doing a lot of these things, but it's really the entire team, isn't it?
Yes, of course. I'm talking about product manager, but if you remember at the beginning, I said uncovers what creates value and lead the teams to create value. That entails that software engineers are part of the problem understanding and the solution definition. They should not be coders. Coders, I mean, in a negative way, that the product manager say, this is a solution and you should build it. That doesn't work because then you lack the power of the creativity of software engineers, product designers who know a lot. So what I like saying is product manager needs to understand the business viability. How does this make sense from a business perspective? Software engineers need to collaborate on feasibility given the constraints. The product manager needs to say, the worth of this for us, we can invest, for example, a month. So that will make it viable. And then the engineers will say, given these constraints, let's figure out a solution that fits. And the product designer needs to ensure that we create something that is desirable and understandable. In other words, usable. So the overlap of all of this, it is what makes a product that is worth building. If you lack desirability, then nobody's going to use it. If you lack feasibility, you will always be spinning, but you don't deliver because you cannot. And if it's not viable, you create something awesome, but then the business won't fly.
I was recently talking to a product designer, and they were saying that you should covet every process step and every screen in your app. I'm just going to go back to your Uber example. When you open up the Uber app, it doesn't ask you a whole bunch of questions. It says, here's where you are right now. All I want to know is where you are going. That's it. And then you just select your car and you're off and going. Well, if there was all these other process steps involved, that might create so much friction that someone would leave your app to a faster, easier one, unless it adds lots of value. So I'm just kind of curious on your thoughts of coveting these screens and these processes the way that that product designer shared with me.
It reminds me in one of the place I was. We had a situation with the customer service. They were overloaded with requests. And I went to talk to them to understand what was going on. And what surprised me, 50% of the requests, like cancellations, refunds, changing bank data, could be done in my account. The users were able to do that. The only issue was they couldn't find it because my account was bloated with so many functionalities. In other words, it was not prioritized what made most sense for the users. What we did there, which was unconventional for many, I hid the menus that were not used that frequently. And just by hiding that, it dropped the customer service calls by half very fast because users could find that. And then step by step, we started at the menu, but in a more prioritized way. So it's about making prominent what the users want. So when you understand the job, you start saying like, what is the user journey? What does the user need now? You said about Uber, I know where I am. I don't need to type that. I can tell you where I want to go. And then later you decide, for example, which vehicle you have. But at this point, you're not even talking about payment. That is in your account as before you decide that. So you're not making this decision. So when you understand the decision process and what kind of job you're doing, then you can prioritize. Having more features is not something bad, but not prioritizing where you present the features and showing all the time everything, that is bad.
I appreciate everything you've shared so far about what it's like to be in a trap state and how to untrap yourselves. But now let's think about this from a different perspective. Someone's listened to this podcast and said, oh, we are in a trap state. We need to get ourselves out of it. And I really like all these concepts. However, because we were in this trap state for so long and didn't realize it, now we've got all of this essentially bloatware in our product. We have so much work that we've done that also needs to be undone so that we can start feeling like we're working anew. Can you explain how you can work through that process?
Yeah, about untrapping product teams, you need to prioritize actually which trap you want to overcome. Step back and have a health check. And you can have the health check in different flight levels. You can look at the company, the strategy, discovery, delivery. And then you say, where are we here? And then you can say, what is the one thing we want to change? We want to see differently right now. Let's start working on this one and seeing what we could do differently, doing today for a better tomorrow. And many times, what happens is we realize the product is over engineered and there are some symptoms showing that it takes very long to deliver new features. Customers are not using everything you have. Then you can say, what is the easiest way for us to start changing this right now? Select some things to remove from the product. Let's retire features. Let's develop a culture of retire. Let's experiment with that and see how that helps us. And one thing I like telling team is don't panic when you do a health check because you may find many things that you don't like. And that's fine. There's no product team that is perfect, no company that is perfect. And if you try doing like I did in the beginning of my career, which is one, fixing everything at once, two, lecturing people, it's not going to work. People don't like being lectured, and you cannot fix everything at once. No one is going to support that. It's a too big of a change. But you can make incremental change, show the result, and then you start receiving positive feedback and support to change the other things that you don't like. So you go on this step by step, gradual change, and so on. And the others, you just make peace with them, accept the way it is, and you take this as a marathon, not a sprint. It's something that will take time. And here we are not talking about months. There's a big chance, depending on how trapped you are, we're talking about a few years to change everything for scenario. But you can see a small improvement. It's like compound interest. In the beginning, it's slow, but then it gets big and nice.
Sometimes customers can get quite loud with their requests. They'll talk to the salespeople, they'll write an email, they'll go onto the website and they'll post in other places about what features that they want. I've done that. I'll go into a product that I really like, I'll go to their website and I'll go to the feature request section and I'll type in a request. And then I find out other people want that. And then there's this whole stream of comments and thumbs up that come through. And now there's pressure. It feels like there's pressure on the product team to get that feature out as quickly as they can. And that could be the trap that you're walking into. Because I think this is one thing that we need to sometimes step back and think about, which is that if you do the feature right and it works for the long term, and it's not something that you just quickly cranked out, customers are actually willing to wait for it.
Yes, the core is understanding what is that feature for. So what do you enable the customer to do? Because when the customer asks for a feature, it means the customer is trying to achieve something. And if we jump exactly to the feature, I like making the doctor example. As a patient, I go to the doctor and I say, hey, I have some pain here on my back, and I'm here today because I just want you to operate me. So I'm gonna lie there on the bed and please just operate. The doctor will look at me and say, "Hey, let's have a conversation here. What did you do yesterday?" I said, "No, nothing special. I was at home and so on." The doctor, "Did you carry anything?" "Yeah, I helped just a friend there. They had some box to move. I just helped, but it was from the first floor to the fourth floor, but nothing really annoying. I'm young, I'm strong." And the doctor will say, "Just go home and sit and relax. It will be fine." The thing is, the doctor is a specialist, but the doctor can only provide a solution once the doctor understands the problem. And it's fine for me to think I know the solution because I know my body and I may think I know, but I'm not the specialist. And as customers, we start using the product and we think we know exactly which feature we want. And many times might be the right feature. It can be. But if you are the doctor, you do need to understand what that is for so you can measure if customers are achieving the desired result. Because then you are, again, delivering value and collecting value. So this conversation and exchange are highly important. And one thing that I write a lot in the book is nothing can replace contact with real customers. So if someone is so excited to recommend a feature, talk to this customer, understand the real scenario, and so on, and talk to them. And then you can decide when you're going to do this. But first, you need to understand.
David Pereira, this has been a great conversation. I really appreciate all of the thoughts and insights you shared today. Before we wrap up, how might our listeners be able to reach out to you?
Sure. So you can reach me out on LinkedIn. I'm quite available there. Also, you can find more about me in my website. There you'll find courses as well as my book with a sample. So you can get the book sample there for free. So that's how you can reach out to me.
Wonderful. I'll make sure that all of your contact information, this transcript, and much more are available on the agileinAction.com website. If you're watching this video on YouTube, it'll be down there in the description. And if you're listening on a podcast app, just go down there to the show notes and you'll find a link as well. David Pereira, this has been a great conversation. Thank you so much for the time you spent today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure being here.
Thank you for listening to the Agile in Action podcast with Bill Raymond. Subscribe now to stay current on the latest trends in team organization and agile techniques. Please take a moment to rate and comment to help us grow our community. This podcast is produced in affiliation with Cambermast LLC, and our executive producer is Riyama Dagason. If there is a topic you would like Bill to cover, contact him directly at bill.raymond@agileinaction.com.